Well, welcome to the follow-up after show, kind of our web extra, the viewers that saw the big show. We have a lot more to talk about, so that's why we're doing the after show. We have Daniel Soza. He was on the big show. He is a volunteer with Michigan United. He's also with Samaritas and Refugee Settlement. One area we didn't get into in the big show has to do with, so ironically, why we talk about immigration and all these people are trying to come over from Central America, Cuba, Haiti, Venezuela, to get into our country. There's some news now that actually Americans are flocking to Mexico in big numbers, getting temporary residency status. So what do you know about that?
So, you know, it's funny because the cost of living has affected, you know, migration patterns, right? And I'm talking, anytime somebody moves to another area, it's migration, right? They don't have to move to a whole other country. But in this case, you know, you have Americans, especially retirees, moving to some of the cities in Mexico, more of the, you know, not necessarily the tourist towns that you see along the border, or even the big cities like a Mexico City, or some of the more industrial cities like a San Luis Potosí. You see them in towns like San Miguel de Allende, you know, tourist towns, right, somewhat, but more in the inner parts of Mexico. And the cost of living is really low, right? Generally not, you won't see like a younger American from, say, California move to Mexico. A younger American who's looking for work, a lower cost of living while they're still, you know, out there, you know, in the labor market. They're moving to places like Texas, great labor market.
Right.
Cost of living is a little bit better than California. But if you're retired on a fixed income,
right,
there's a lot of benefits to Mexico. Again, cost of living, but you also have a lot of people who speak English, you know, and especially in a town like that. I have a good friend who's a retiree, San Miguel de Allende.
Okay.
So if you want to remember that town,
okay,
when you get ready to retire, he goes there like for a month out of every year. You know, and half the town, he says, are Americans.
Interesting.
You know, and they just, you know, they hang out, they enjoy the scenery, and you know, it's a great place to go to. And you know, financially, it just makes good sense for a lot of people.
So it's leading to a little bit of gentrification. It's moving the population out of some of these neighborhoods in Mexico, which isn't really a good thing. I'm sure they're not happy about it, but then I'm sure the business owners, those that run the restaurants, if there's hotels, I mean, that's cash on the barrel. I mean,
gentrification is an interesting discussion because it's not always, I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. It's not always necessarily a bad thing, right? Corporate gentrification can be pretty tough on people when you're buying up properties and kicking them out of their homes.
Okay.
But gentrification, I went to school at Michigan State, and in the late 90s I was there, and on the north end of town, there was a lot of empty buildings. You know, and the business community came in and they bought up several of those buildings. And I used to have a picture somewhere, and it showed a whole block of dilapidated buildings on Grand River Avenue, the west end of Grand River, which is on the north end of Lansing.
Sure.
You know, and it was just a whole block. And that was in 1995, and then in 2015, every single one of those buildings has been renovated, and there's a business occupying them now. So I mean, gentrification is kind of a pretty widely encompassing term. Yeah, that's true. But you know, it can have a positive effect on some communities as well.
Right. I'm glad you kind of cleared that up. There's two sides to gentrification.
There's two sides to it, yeah.
But the last word on that whole Americans flocking to Mexico, there was an 85% increase of Americans going there with that temporary status from 2019 to 2022. So that's not going to. It's not going to go down anytime soon. So.
No, not that.
So one other area I wanted to get into, your role as a volunteer with Michigan United. I said at the beginning of the big show that as your intro, you kind of deal in immigrant rights, right? So talk to us about sort of your role. What do you do? And for viewers that want to know more about that, maybe getting involved, tell us about Michigan United.
So Michigan United is a 501c4. So there's a difference between that and a 501c3. According to the U.S. tax code, a 501c3, you know, they can't do things like endorse candidates, whereas a 501c4 can do that sort of thing. But what Michigan United mainly does is advocate for specific policies.
Okay.
A big one that we've talked about on the show before in Michigan is the Drive Michigan Forward bill.
Okay.
And that is a piece of legislation that would allow undocumented immigrants to obtain driver's license or I shouldn't say undocumented immigrants, immigrants who are in Michigan who don't have a state ID to attempt to apply for and receive a driver's license. All of those people who would be applying for driver's licenses have legal presence, meaning they have some sort of temporary visa, some sort of status that will allow them to apply for that license and then give folks in Michigan an idea of who they are and purchase auto insurance. So when people hear that, the first thought is, well, that's giving undocumented people, identification, which to some degree it is true, but wouldn't you want to know who's here? That's the small part of it. The larger part of that legislation is, what do the Dow Chemicals and next tiers of our region and around the state do with those employees who come here from other countries and they just want to drive?
Sure, right.
Right. They want to drive to Frankenmuth and see it during Christmas.
Everybody does, sure.
Right, who doesn't? Who doesn't want to go down and watch a Lions or a Tigers or a Pistons game?
Sure.
Well, maybe not the Lions because they don't watch football in other countries, right? But not American football. But yeah, it's a good piece of legislation that a lot of those companies will give a soft endorsement to. But what's really interesting to me is that the first time I had discussions about it here in Saginaw with some of those leaders in the community at Next Year and at Dow,
right.
You could, just 10, 15 years ago, you could have a really rational discussion about why that was a good piece of legislation. And in that short amount of time, it's just really tough conversation to have in the current atmosphere.
Sure. Well, you're on the front lines of it. Like I said, you're a great advocate for Michigan United and Samaritas. So if viewers want to get more information on Michigan United and Samaritas, there's some information on Michigan United, Justice and Dignity, miunited.org. Yep. And is it still Samaritas.org?
Yep, Samaritas.org.
Oh, there you go. Thanks for coming in. Always great discussion.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. And thank you for joining us tonight on the After Show.